Hi, I'm Mike Reynolds, a senior reporter covering the media industry with S&P Global Market Intelligence, Tech Media, and Telecom News Team. Welcome to MediaTalk, a podcast hosted by S&P Global, wherein the news and research staff explore issues in the evolving media landscape. I'm joined by S&P Global Market Intelligence Kagan analyst Scott Robson, who specializes in TV networks. How are we doing today, Scott?
I'm doing well, Mike. Looking forward to another great Masters this week.
Yes, that's where we're going. It's teeing off at Augusta National on Thursday. So we're going to talk about many things golf, including what's going to happen down there at Butler Cabin in the Lake and the would-be PGA and the LIV Union and who's watching the sport these days. Before we do this, though, let's assess our games such as they are, Scott.
Yeah, I played a round of mini golf over the weekend in preparation for this podcast. But other than that, I haven't hit the course yet this year. I played a lot in my teens, but haven't found much time for the course in recent years. But really hoping to get out there soon.
I got you. I'm in the same boat. I played a decent amount with my father until I was about 20. Now I go out a couple times per year. I haven't yet this season. My son has the bug. Maybe I'll catch it again. I've been to the U.S. Open in Bethpage, Long Island, and when it was held here in my town of Mamaroneck, New York. As to the Masters, Scott, I'm assuming you're going to be tuning into ESPN and then CBS.
Yes, I'll be tuning into the action. Hopefully, we get a good competition this year. I don't watch every golf event, but always make time for the Masters. It really feels like a special event when watching on TV. Truly a tradition unlike any other, as they say. Now, if we get to Sunday and there's a runaway leader, I'll still keep the broadcast on in the background. I think the Masters is always great for quality ambient noise and relaxing sounds.
Exactly. They have those bird noises. I don't know how they get them, but they are on there no matter what.
Mm.
Now let's get down to some of the business of golf, Scott. Masters has a unique media rights deal and sells minimal ads. Why is that?
Yeah, so CBS doesn't pay for the broadcast rights for the Masters, which is odd as it's routinely the most watched event in golf. So this stems from Augusta being protective over the broadcast. So they limit the amount of on-course signage and they keep the commercial load to just 4 minutes per hour. And so there's 6 companies that sponsor the event. You've got AT&T, Delta, IBM, Mercedes-Benz, Rolex, and UPS, and they split up those 4 minutes of commercial time per hour. So now, while the Masters does not make any money on the domestic TV rights here in the US, the event does bring in around 25 million per year in international TV rights. The big chunk of that comes from Comcast Sky Sports in the UK and Ireland. More importantly, really, the Masters makes its money off of merchandise sales. So it's estimated that the event brings in about 70 million on merch alone, which is pretty mind-blowing. So they're making up some of that lost media rights revenue in merchandise for sure.
Obviously, the Masters approach is much different to the way the other major golf deals are structured. Scott?
Yeah, so for comparison, the USGA brings in about 93 million per year in its current contract with NBC and the Golf Channel for the rights to the men's US Open, women's US Open, senior open, and US Amateur. Now, Fox, interestingly enough, still has to pay half of that rights fee because they opted out of their 12-year deal in 2020 and sold the rights to NBC Universal. So that's an interesting wrinkle there. Aside from that, the Ryder Cup gets an estimated 55 million per event under their current deal with NBC Universal, and then the British Open gets 50 million per year. So it appears as though the Masters is leaving some money on the table here.
Yeah, no doubt. This year's Masters will mark the end of Sean McManus's tenure as CBS Sports chairman. Dave Burson's going to be sitting in that soon enough at CBS Sports. Have to imagine that Dave getting a new deal done for the Masters for the 70th time on CBS has to be one of his top priorities.
Yes, I think this is an important relationship for CBS to maintain, and it's cost efficient too. It seems like it won't be going to another network anytime soon. It's been a solid relationship for both parties. I don't think Augusta is seeking out a new broadcast partner. They clearly aren't looking for the highest bidder, as the event doesn't carry a license fee. You look at it, they're still charging $1.50 for a sandwich.
PGA audiences are down about 20% so far in 2024. Tiger Woods is supposed to play in the Masters coming up in the next couple of days. I'm assuming he's going to bring more viewers to the Masters.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiger has always been great for ratings. I think he really comes out to play at the Masters, and I'd imagine the folks at CBS are hoping he makes the cut. I read he shot a 31 on the front nine on a practice round last week, so I'm sure fans are getting excited for him to make a run this year. When Tiger won in 1997, it was the most watched final round of the Masters on record with an average audience of 20.3 million. And now, by comparison, viewership for the final round of the Masters last year was 12.1 million. So that really ebbs and flows based on how competitive the final round is. As you
Right.
mentioned, though, yeah, the PGA audiences are down 20% this year. I think some of that has to do with the overall macro decline in TV viewership stemming from cord cutting and migration to streaming. But there are also some other factors at play. There were some comments last week about the declining ratings for the PGA Tour this year. Rory was vocal about the dip, alluded to the fact that the feud between PGA and LIV might be weighing on viewership.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's a dichotomy coming into Augusta. John Ram is the defending champion. He's on the Live Tour along with Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson and many other notables. I'm assuming they're going to also bring some watchers to the tournament this weekend. But overall, it's got to be a little tough for the golf world to navigate at this juncture.
Yeah, absolutely. So this PGA versus Live battle has been going on for over 2 years now, and I think that some fans might be growing tired of it. I know the players are. I think what's best for golf is to have the best players in the world competing for major events like this. I think initially there was a negative perspective of the Live players from the general public, but I think that's died down a bit as more players have joined Live, and most fans just want to see the best players compete.
Yeah, I think that's what we all as fans want to see. So, Scott, does the PGA and the Live merge, and what happens if they don't?
Yeah, I think eventually they will. So in June of 2023, it was announced that Live Golf, the PGA Tour, and the European Tour would merge to join a new venture that would be funded by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. Now, the deadline for completing that deal came and went at the end of 2023. I think currently the deal is still being ironed out. There's a lack of clarity and timing around the proposed merger, and it's created tension and uncertainty amongst the players. If it doesn't go through, I think that could be bad for the PGA long term, as Live has more money to entice top talent to come play for Live. But overall, I think it's going to go through.
Gotcha. If the merger happens, would the PGA rights deals through 2030 be reworked? They work with CBS and NBC Sports and ESPN. The CW, which covers some of the Live tournaments, could they get a mix in a reworked contract?
Yeah, I think the merger could cause the current media rights deal to be reworked. So the PGA signed a 9-year media rights deal that went into effect in 2022 that we estimate to be valued at around $680 million per year. Under the terms of the deal, CBS broadcasts about 20 events per season. NBC has 10. And then on top of that, ESPN Plus is roughly 4,000 hours of live streaming coverage each year. So the CW, as you mentioned, has that deal with Live. So it would seem like a new deal would be forged. And I imagine the CW would try and get a few tournaments. Looking at golf media rights deals, the Fox deal with USGA that I mentioned earlier was reworked 5 years into the deal. Warner Brothers Discovery had a deal that was reworked 2 years into its launch. So golf is used to reworking these media rights deals.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the Warner Brothers Discovery, the extensive right outside the U.S. with its golf TV? And it's quite a different setup now.
So back in 2018, before the Warner Brothers merger, Discovery signed a $2 billion 12-year deal for the global PGA Tour rights outside of the US. It was a big bet at the time. This coincided with the launch of the streaming service Golf TV. This was short-lived, though. The streaming service was shuttered in 2022. PGA got the rights back for most of the regions. Warner Brothers Discovery held on to some in certain regions that are covered by Discovery Plus and Eurosport. But in many regions like Asia, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, we saw rights go elsewhere. It was a big deal back in 2018 that kind of fizzled out, and now it's changed considerably.
All right. We're getting to the end now. We here in the States, we're used to watching our golf on television or facsimiles, as the case may be. Do you think some tournaments, Scott, will eventually become streaming only events?
Yeah, I think that golf is a good property for streamers to experiment with. It would make sense for Netflix to broadcast select tournaments. Fans are already getting used to going to Netflix to check out the full swing doc, and they're getting more and more aggressive in bidding on live sports content. So I think golf on Netflix would fit pretty well.
We mentioned Tiger and he and Rory, who you mentioned. They're launching the Tomorrow's Golf League. It's a hybrid approach with 6 teams of 4 PGA players competing on a largely simulated course. ESPN is going to have the coverage in prime time. I think it's going to start in January. Is that something you think is going to resonate, Scott, with golf fans?
Yeah, so this is an interesting one. I think it's a risky endeavor. The league has an indoor setup, relies on advanced technology to simulate gameplay. So it's an untested approach to golf. I think the idea here is to attract younger audiences. From my understanding, it's almost like they'll be playing a video game. So maybe the Twitch audience that is already comfortable watching video games will find it enjoyable.
Interesting. Speaking of younger demos, is golf attracting younger fans? I think there were some issues recently at some of the patrons might have been overserved a little bit at this year's Waste Management Open in Phoenix. Maybe a bit too much Happy Gilmore. On the other hand, LIV seems to want to encourage a more festive atmosphere at its tournaments.
Yeah, so as we just mentioned with the TGL, golf seems to be actively trying to draw in a more youthful audience. Live has DJs at their events. The Waste Management Open has become a frat party. You saw some players this year, like Zach Johnson, Jordan Spieth, voice their annoyances about the Waste Management tournament and the rowdy crowds. I do think it can get out of hand. I see what the PGA is going for, though. It reminds me of the infield at some of these prestigious horse races where you have a polished sporting event going on amidst a wild party. Maybe that will help bring in more viewers. It can't hurt. We have survey data that shows 82% of respondents that say they watched golf on TV were over the age of 35 in the US. Now, Chinese audiences skew younger, with about a third of viewers under 35. So oddly enough, golf YouTubers in the US seem to be gaining popularity. So it might be a case where the sport is growing amongst the youth, but they'd rather watch YouTubers do fun challenges and give tutorials rather than watch the PGA Tour. And then speaking of Happy Gilmore, it looks like we're getting a sequel soon, so that should be fun.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of us want that to happen. All right. Finally, Scott, who do you think is going to be fitted with the green jacket this year?
I have to root for Brooks Koepka and Max Homa here. They're some of my favorite players to watch. I think Rahm has a good shot at repeating, and I'm a big fan of the menu he put together this year with all the tapas and traditional Spanish cuisine. So maybe his home cooking will help fuel a repeat.
I gotcha. I like Rahm's lunch menu. As I'm going for the defending champion, it would save the club perhaps a little money on tailoring his new jacket. I'm also rooting for the man who favors orange to green. So I'd also like to see maybe Ricky Fowler break through to win his first major. We'll see how we do with our predictions and look forward to watching all the golf this weekend. That concludes this episode of Media Talk. I just wanted to thank Scott for spending a lot of time sharing his views on the Masters and the business of golf. Appreciate it a lot, Scott.
Thanks, Mike. Hope you have a great Masters weekend.
You too. This is Mike Reynolds. Thanks to all of you listening. We'll catch up soon on the next edition of Media Talk. Enjoy Augusta.